Welcome back to Saint Show. Today, I'm super excited about our guest. We have Doc, whom I've interviewed before on my show, 420 Chief, but he's introducing his service animal, Alma. And Alma's very special because before she was a service dog, she was actually a military working dog. So, welcome to the show. I'm Chief,
And I'm Frizz.
and we bring you the Saint Show. So, with that said, I'm just going to jump right in and introduce Doc, and he can kind of tell us all about Alma because she is so amazing. What's up,
And
Doc?
I'm Doc.
Hey, Doc.
What's up,
Well,
everybody? Oh
welcome to the
shit.
show, man. How you been?
Good. I think my camera's like, I don't know what it's doing here,
It looks
man.
good.
Well, anyway, yeah. No, thanks for having me, man. You told me about it, and of course, I was super excited. Most of your endeavors seem to be like fantastic ideas, and I support. So, hell yeah, that's why I'm here.
Absolutely. And along the way, we found how much interest there really is in just dogs. People love dogs more than people. I mean, I've pointed out on my TikTok videos, if I lead off with a dog, I'll get more views than if it's of this ugly mug. But we wanted to do this to raise awareness just for individuals, business owners, to be more confident with service animals. And if people don't have service animals, maybe some of the benefits of them, who they would be good for, and where you can and can't take them. You know, what your rules and responsibilities of a service animal are. And I know that you've been on some amazing adventures with Alma. And so can you kind of just tell us a little bit about her and her background?
Yeah. So, man, I'll probably get a little bit emotional here. It fantastic story. Alma, I was not even supposed to get her. I was getting a different dog essentially. So what had happened is I'd gotten COVID back in 21. I was hospitalized for it. While in the hospital, I had a heart attack, and recently recently retired from the Navy. So I had so much going on, including my father just recently passed as well. So I went down into a pretty bad depression. I knew I needed help. So I reached out to a buddy uh, who was he's a retired sergeant major, worked canines his whole career. So he had some hookups, and first time in my career, I actually, or in my life, I pulled one of those favors. Felt guilty about it, but I knew, I was in dire straits. So get to the place 3 days out of the hospital. I drive to Pennsylvania from St. Louis, and I get to the place, and I hear the lady on the phone talking, saying, "I'm sorry, but I've promised the dog to somebody else, and they're here to pick him up." So, me being the shy person that I am, I interrupted, asked what it was about because it sounded like it was about me, and it was. The guy on the phone was a handler of that specific dog I was supposed to get, had just retired and was wanting that dog back. And I mean, absolutely, I couldn't stand in the way of that. So I said, yeah, let him have the dog, and I broke down, had an emotional breakdown, and Alma came up to me. So um, any of the other crap I was working with the other dog,
Excuse
uh,
me.
it didn't matter. Uh, that dog was now out of the picture, but Alma came up to me almost. She knew that I was hurting, and she's the only one that came up to comfort me. So it was. I always say she picked me. I didn't pick her. Um, but getting to her story, she'd only been there in the facility maybe a month after training, coming from Iraq. She was in Iraq for 6 years. She was a bomb detection dog. Uh, 6 years. So her whole life, essentially, other than being born and training, she spent in a foreign country doing things for our country that most of our citizens wouldn't even dare do.
No
So
telling how many lives she saved just doing that, that's
right.
amazing.
So
Yeah, that's a true hero right there.
there's no doubt, and she continues to serve. So I've looked into her background. I can't really find much of anything. I have all of her vet records and whatnot, but I don't know. I can't find any info. I can't find handlers. I can't find units. Um, but you can see under the vet bills or the vet documents, they're definitely military veteran or veterinarians that are signing off on it. So that's all I could really find out. But it's amazing having her. I swear to you, she saved my life. She saves my life on a daily basis. Um, she knows when my anxieties is about to redline. I don't know it, and that's one of the issues I have is I'm still trying to learn what my triggers are from the PTSD.
Yeah, and let's back up. You said something that we've talked about briefly before on the first episode, but you said, "She picked me." And that is something that I try to explain to people is not every animal can be a service animal. Not every animal will have that connection with you. So that connection that the animal has with you and that you have with the animal is one of the most important things because that's what the animal uses to cue off of you. They get to know you. And when they pick you, kind of like you said, then you kind of have that connection. You know that this dog is going to be attentive to you. And so that's really yeah, man, 11 years or no, 6 years and
6 years.
that
So
that's something.
keep in
That's
mind,
tough.
she's 9 years old when I got her, and you've seen the bond that we have. Uh, Most people think I've raised her since a pup. That the bond is so strong. I can't even walk out of the room without her getting up, following me to make sure I'm okay. She won't necessarily stay. She'll just turn around and go sit back down or whatever. But she's she's pretty amazing, man. I can't explain to you how they do it. Uh, all I can tell you is that there is nothing but love in that dog's heart, and it's not only me that she helps. 2 years ago, we were in Carlisle for Wyndham Water Empire Academy, and this lady, one of the workers at the hotel, walked out. It was obvious she was upset about something, and I asked her. I said, "Are you okay?" And she says, "Not really." So Alma went right up to her, and you know, 5 minutes later, this lady's smiling and happy and crying tears of joy. She was so moved by it. She put a post on Facebook about how Alma completely changed her whole week.
It's
So
it's
That's
truly
amazing.
amazing. It really is, Doc, and I've actually experienced that myself with Stryker, man. I do 22 push-ups every single day to raise awareness for the veteran suicide crisis. So I try to go out and hike to add a little value, to the video for me, just to be healthy. But one day I was out underneath a bridge out in the middle of nowhere, and there was an old boat ramp there, and there was a lady outside of her vehicle sitting by the river just sobbing. And Stryker jumped out of the vehicle and ran straight over to her, and she was just sat there and started petting him, and I just stood back because I like, well, obviously, he feels something or knows something that I don't, and I realized, everything happens for a reason, and that day, that reason was that lady needed to meet Stryker, and he could tell, she was over there sobbing, and she petted him for a while, and I probably stood there a good 10 minutes, didn't interrupt, I just watched, and finally, she thanked me and said that, she was going through some things at home, and she was just waiting there to be safe, waiting for the bus to get back so she could pick up her kids.
mm,
Okay,
Wow.
and it's and aside from that even, just taking him across the nation to veteran meetups, it's, interesting to watch Stryker and who he chooses, like you said, Alma picked you, but, um, we've got a good friend in here, Chris. I know that when I took Stryker and Spike to Mississippi, they both really took to him,
mhm,
and I would just sit back and watch him and how he responded to Chris, and there was at one point where he was actually attentive to him, and he would just stare as Chris sat there very quietly, but he would just stare at him and watch his cues, like trying to pick up on his breathing and heart rate and all that, like you said Alma does with you. So every time I hear these stories, I think it's important to highlight how service animals help so many other people, not necessarily just their handler. They help us 24/7 if we're with them 24/7. But
mhm.
when we're out and about, Frizz talks to this, how many times people have come up to him and had conversations with him, and that's helped him so much with his social anxiety. But it kind of takes the attention away from us being in the spotlight and onto the animal. And
Right.
it's easy to
100%.
talk about your animal.
I have kind of mixed feelings about that. I'm the same way. A lot of people come up to me when I'm out with her. There's some days where I'm okay with it, and there's just some days I'm just not. And If I could put one public service announcement out there, and this is just from my perspective only, when you see somebody with a service animal, they have it for a reason. And just keep in mind, they may or may not be having a good day. So it's not always a good thing to approach, um, uh, for what it's worth.
Thank you for saying that because we're trying to educate and inform our listeners. And a lot of service animals, not all of them like Striker, I don't have an ask to pet patch on his vest, but that's a valid point. You never know what kind of day the handler's having, nor the animal. There's certain people that Stryker doesn't want around him. He won't bite you, but if you come up close to him and he's trying to protect me and you have a bad vibe, he's gonna bark, and if you get too close, he will do his job and
Mhm,
protect me. So you need to be careful. Please always ask, "Hey, is it okay if I pet? Is it okay if I pet the dog?" And most of the time, I'm gonna say yes, but again, you never know what kinda day someone's having. They may say no, and that's fine. You say, "Beautiful dog." But thank you for calling that out, brother. Like, that's important.
See, that happened to me at a Walmart. I told you, Chief, about it. These little girls, I was looking at candles. I turned around, and these little girls come up and they want to start petting my dog. Now, Bean is super friendly. She probably wouldn't hurt a fly, but you don't know that, you know. So I do have a ask before petting patch on her vest. I found out that there are red and yellow leashes you can get, but nobody knows what those mean.
right.
So yeah, knowledge to people that don't know is huge with me. Fill them in, let them know. Because not all disabilities can be seen. Some of these dogs do diabetes, migraines. You know, it's an amazing thing.
Doc, can you walk us through maybe some of the day-to-day, um, routines that you have with Alma and some of the roles that she plays in helping you out just day to day?
So, I mean, the most routine we have in our day is waking up, eating, and going to bed. Um, Other than that, it's kind of I'm sporadic. I'm all over the place, you know. But what she mainly helps me, like I said earlier, I don't know what my triggers are, why my anxiety goes through the roof the way it does when it does. Um, the anger issues. She senses it way before, and she'll come over and she'll start nudging me. And half the time I'll reach out and I'll pet her. I'm like, okay, okay. But she doesn't stop. She persists. And if I ignore her, then she comes in, she sits and puts her head on my lap. If I ignore her, then she starts leaning in on me. And then I'm like, all right, well, obviously I'm ramping up. So that kind of makes me step back, focus on breathing, calming down. Uh, I can worry about what caused it later, but the immediate action is to calm down. And she knows she's persistent, man. You've seen her. She won't let up until
Yeah,
I
that's amazing that when they can sense it and they interrupt that, obstructive behavior is I think
Mhm.
what that's technically called, and it's funny how they can sense it, and like you said, sometimes you don't even know. But it definitely, in my opinion, an example with Stryker is it's helped me become more self-aware. Like, I'll get annoyed sometimes if I'm
Oh, yeah.
driving, like, I was in Atlanta traffic stuck, and Stryker wouldn't leave me alone. Like,
Yeah, she does
I
that shit all the
on it, and
time.
he's leaning into me, and I'm like, "Ah, knock it off," and I realize, "Oh, I'm just stuck in traffic like anybody else." I'm like, "You know what? It's gonna be fine." I'm like, "Thanks, buddy. Now stop," because I was getting annoyed because
She gets aggressive, man. Like you said, when I'm driving, she she'll nuzzle me, man, and she'll nuzzle me hard. I'm like, Stop," you know, to the point where I'm almost going to get in an accident because she's messing with me so much.
I'm glad Bean doesn't do that much. She's little. She can't get around in the car that well to nudge me because she'd be nudging me 24/7 in my car.
Yeah, yeah, almost my front seat buddy. She rides in her front seat with me.
So does Bean.
There's pretty much the only place I don't take her is to my kids' practice or his games, uh, because when she was trained, her reward was a ball. So she goes ape shit at the baseball games and all that stuff, and she won't listen, man. She sees that ball and forget about it, and it's the only time she doesn't listen.
Yeah. Yeah, she's amazing. I've actually been out camping with Doc and with Alma, and I took Stryker with me, and Stryker and Alma became buddies. We've even gone hiking since then and taken the dogs out, but, she really is amazing, and like Doc pointed out, I noticed that she would pick up on me as well because she noticed I'm anxious a lot like her dad, and with her and Stryker, we camped out in a it's a pretty area, but it can be very sketch, and, it was a little sketch when we were there just with the
Yeah,
folks that were, surrounding us, and I know that, with lots of kids and lots of noise, generators, that can make you feel high anxiety when you're out camping because the point of camping is to get away from all that
right.
sound, all the people, and so I could tell, both Doc and myself were a little high anxiety in that spot, but the animals helped so much, and it was kinda funny because they kept the people a little bit away, and these folks particularly had children that wanted to come play and pet the dogs, and that was okay for a little while, until it was like, "Alright, now it's quiet time, we gotta stop." And both, Stryker and Alma did so well with the kids, they even kinda kept them in an area, they were, like, herding the children, and it was actually kinda funny when the parents came over, the kids were protective against, at least one individual in particular, I remember, and I thought that was interesting how the dogs can really pick up and sense things off people, kids, and they're so perceptive about their surroundings. So, Doc, you wanna tell us, maybe some challenges you faced or gone through with Alma and how that's kinda helped strengthen your bond with her?
Uh, yeah, it's the same old story. Mine's not any more special or different than anybody else's. The social anxiety going into, well, let's just say restaurants and things like that. I had a really, really hard time with that without her, to the point where it's affecting family life. Um, since I've had her, I know that she's in there and she gets on the table. She's pressing up against my legs the whole time, and just gives me that sense of maybe it's not 100% okay, but it'll be all right because I know I've got her there. Um, and challenges with that. So we were traveling and we were we were in Georgia, outside of Atlanta, and stopped at a Mexican restaurant, and I had the lady try to tell me that she couldn't come in. I'm like, well, yes, you can. So I started carrying these little business cards. Essentially, I got them off Amazon. It's got the ADA law on it, and I just handed it to her and educated her on it and tried to. And but there's some days that, man, that sets me off more than anything. I said, well, and I have to try not to be rude, and that's a really, really hard thing for me to do sometimes.
Yep.
Um, if
That
you
Yeah, that's kinda my whole mission behind the Saint show is I really would like for this information to get out there. I would like for business owners to be educated on it because there's nothing more difficult for me than when I go into an establishment and they tell me I can't bring my service animal in, or they try to charge me a deposit for my service animal. Now I'm getting triggered, and it defeats the purpose of me having the animal in the first place. Now I have to explain myself to you, and then they'll ask, "Well, do you have this or that?" I do have a certification for Stryker. You can't ask me for it, but when I have to show that, that it gets me boiling,
oh,
and
yeah.
it's it's difficult, and it's hard for a lot of handlers, and we've heard so many horror stories of people who are like, "You know what? I don't even take my dog in the store anymore because of that very reason," and that's not okay, That's not okay
Right.
because these animals have a job.
Well, that happened to me last week at the grocery store with that guy stopping me, the security guy, and he wanted proof and he wanted all this and that. And I was like, there is nothing that you can carry. It's the way it is. There's nothing unless you present them, like you said, Doc, with that card. There's really nothing. There's no real certification, you know, and people just don't know.
That's what gets me probably upset the most is when somebody comes in and acts like they know what they're doing and they have zero clue and they're
Yep.
assholes about it.
Yep.
So I'm an asshole right back. Um, I went to Connecticut. It was a Navy Lodge of all places, man. My buddy was graduating from OCS and went to Connecticut, made the reservations ahead of time, everything. I get there and the guy behind the desk asked me, "Well, I need to see your vaccination papers." I said, "Well, I don't have them." "Well, I can't let you stay here." I said, "Not only can you not let me stay here, I am staying here. And if you don't get your flunky ass out of my way, we're going to have some serious issues." Not the best move on my part. I get it. But we have these dogs for a reason, right? Um, and I got triggered. So I said, he said nothing about it. And when I made the reservation, it says nothing about it on your website. And I'm not showing you shit. Now give me my damn room key. And so that's the kind of stuff that fortunately I think it's getting better. Most people are kind of getting it nowadays. You're definitely seeing a lot more service dogs, which helps get the word out. But I have to try to keep in mind when that happens, not to fly off the handle, and that's not so easy to do, as you guys know.
Yeah. Oh
Yeah,
yeah.
starting to see more and more service animals, via social media. I don't see a whole lot of them out and about. I guess I am starting to see more with the vests and, um, I think it helps. I think it helps that more people are doing it, but
Yeah.
I'm still finding that it's like, more local businesses or,
Yeah,
uh,
That's
non-American
what it
owned,
is.
non-English speaking businesses. They have no idea, and it's hard for me because I don't wanna be rude, but it's hard for me to be nice and inform or educate someone when we have a language barrier or they have absolutely their own preconceived notion of what the law is. And yeah, like you had mentioned, it's super hard to have a cordial conversation with someone when you're being disrespected and triggered at the same time.
right. But I will say this. Now I went down to the federal building. Uh, had to get Connie a new ID card, and the federal security officer was on his game. He asked me the two questions he was allowed to ask. Knew about it. I answered it, and then afterwards I thanked him for knowing the
Yeah.
law and knowing the questions to ask and for doing his job. Because
Squared away, huh?
yeah, those guys they get shit on so much as it is. Uh,
And do you wanna help remind our viewers, and we can assist if you need to, but what are those 2 questions that a service owner or security is allowed to ask if you
well,
bring your service animal in?
I wasn't gonna go there because I didn't want to steal thunder for the segment later.
Go
No,
ahead.
go ahead. Go ahead.
Uh, Number one is never ask me a question. Number two is get out of my face. No.
Well, yeah.
Basically, is this a service dog and what
Yep.
service does it provide for your disability? They can't ask you what your disability is, but they can ask you what service the dog provides for that disability. Um,
Absolutely, and I plan to
and
bring this up on every episode, just so you know, because that is how we
Hey,
spread awareness, that's how we educate, and I think if we repeat it enough, then people will be like, "Oh, yeah, got it."
now some
100%.
I will if the person's cool about it like that dude, I'll talk about my disability and why I have her. But if they're if they're not cool, then sorry, you don't get any more information.
Yeah, I've been there, man. When I was at the military influencer conference, I've talked about this so many times before. I would just kind of step away and kneel down and hug on Stryker. But there was a one lady that approached me while we were there, and she was so friendly, and she was genuine with her questions. Like she really had valid questions because she had a dog at home, and she's like, I could tell he does that to me sometimes. I just didn't know what it meant. So I actually gave her a demonstration with Stryker and showed her what he does, and she was amazed, but that helped her, better understand what they do and then what things to look out for with her own dog.
Most definitely. I do want to tell one more Alma story. 2 years ago, I was at a conference, and there was a lady. giving a presentation, and I'm not going to say who, but she shared with the audience that she was sexually assaulted as a child, this, that, the other, and you could just it was the first time she had ever shared that with anybody. So by the end of the her set, she was a wreck, right? Well, Alma was sitting, I don't know, 150 feet with me away from her. She came off the stage. Alma got up and went right to her, and she broke down, and they had a moment, and she was feeling so much better afterwards.
Yeah, they
What do
really
you
are.
always say, Chief? What do you always say? We don't deserve them.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. That's something that I do wanna talk about, but I have to answer a question I've been asked before is, when people ask, "What service does the dog provide?" That's really different per person. So for me, Stryker's job is to interrupt any obstructive behavior. So before I start yelling or before I accidentally throat chop something, He'll he'll get my attention, like Doc said, depending on the severity of where I'm at, he may jump up on me, like, when he's like, "Dad, dad, dad," he'll jump up on me, put his paws on my chest, and get my full attention. If it's like Doc had mentioned earlier, before you kind of even realize it, he will come over and he'll paw at me, then he'll like Doc said, if I don't acknowledge that, then he'll lean into me on my leg or something, and then if it's full blown, like, getting my attention, he'll be up in my face. He will get my attention and distract me before, I do anything obstructive, and that helps me become more aware because then I'm like, "Oh, he's pawing me." I'm like, "Okay, this is where I'm at right now. Got it. Thank you." And I can process it and move on. It doesn't work 100% of the time, but he does his best.
And they love it.
Oh, they
It's
do.
fun to them.
Yeah,
Yep.
it's tough.
When I take Bean out, as soon as I put her vest on, she becomes a different dog,
Oh yeah.
and she's very stoic. She just sits there, you know. But when I start to get agitated, I notice she'll start looking at me and doing different things. She doesn't nudge me or nothing yet. She starts just kind of trying to get my attention. She doesn't bark a lot or whine or anything, but she'll get my attention. And if I don't pay attention to her, like you said, then she starts taking her head and putting it under my hand and stuff and lifting
Mhm.
up like this to say, "Hey, get up, walk around, do something, get your mind off this." But that's only happened once so far because I haven't really been too triggered because she's only been my dog for like 3 months now.
And
Oh,
remember,
that's cool.
every service animal is trained to do something different, so that's what my cue is with Stryker. There are others that have service animals that are trained to monitor their breathing, so maybe they're diabetic, and the animal will be very attentive to their breathing and maybe even, like, blood pressure,
There's
And they
so
seizure
can
dogs.
smell the breath and they can tell if your sugar's high or low.
you just to answer that question, you just tell them what the dog's trained to do. You just,
Yep.
I do my best to say it in a nice way, but very, very, very concise. You don't have to give too much information.
Oh
They
yeah.
can't ask to see it. It's up to you. If you did have an outburst in the store, that's on you. Or if your animal has an accident in the store or, God forbid, bites someone, that's your responsibility at that point.
Yeah,
So,
that's the only two times you can be asked to leave. So if you can't control your animal and your animal's not housebroke.
um, Doc, I want to go back to something you had said or we were talking about, and that is, a lot of times folks feel like, "Oh, I don't deserve a service animal, so and so's worse off than myself," and it's not until you actually have one for yourself that you realize, "This has been of value to me." Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, that's a great point actually. It kind of coincides a little bit with it's very similar to survivor's guilt, right? Uh, I could sit there and tell you, you and I could have PTSD, right? Which we do. Your PTSD event is different than my PTSD event, but it doesn't lessen it. The thing that we have to remember and keep in mind is that if you have been diagnosed with that, your event, no matter what it is very real and it matters. And you can't compare your event to someone else's. It's like comparing apples to horseshoes. It just
Yep.
doesn't fit. It doesn't jive. So what you have to do is you have to focus on yourself. And as wrong as this may sound, there's actually good in it. You have to focus on you and not worry about the other person. And until you do that, you're not going to get any better. You have to take that first step. So stop comparing, essentially, uh, you to other people, because your case is unique. Everyone's case is very unique. There's no blanket that we can throw over, even though we do say PTSD. Um,
Yeah.
every case is different.
True.
It is. What advice would you give someone if they were considering, "Is a service animal good for me? Should I get one?" What advice would you give that individual?
If you're to the point where you need a service animal, you're probably already in some type of therapy. uh, I would highly recommend talking to your provider about it, um, finding out if it's even the right fit for you. Some people it's not. So that would be the first step. The second step is to determine, are you going to be responsible enough to be able to care for the animal? Um, you
That's
know,
the big one.
yeah, you got to make sure it's healthy. Have maintain its immunizations, its checkups, its food. I mean, food's a big one, right? That stuff's not cheap. Um,
Bigger the dog, more you're going to spend.
that's right. So, those are the big questions I would be asking myself if I were to do it all over again. Do I have the appropriate space to keep a dog? If I'm in an apartment or whatever the case may be? Is there a yard? If there's not a yard, do I have close availability to bring the dog out and get its exercise and do its daily business? Um,
Great
Looks like
answer.
he throws up.
Yeah, it looks like he did freeze up a little bit. Well,
But
with
you
that
know what he was talking about, that having the bigger dogs and stuff. That's what they're trying to do, is find that smaller dogs work for people in smaller places. You know,
that's
and
true.
any kind of dog can be a service dog according to the ADA. Any kind of dog.
I think the only thing I would really add to that is, like, Stryker, he's high energy, so I have to provide, you know I couldn't be in a small condo and Stryker be okay unless I take him out every day to a dog park. Where we
Right.
live, we can run free, we can play Frisbee, but he's so high energy, he gets anxious if I take him, like, to a hotel and we're cooped up in a room, for a long period of time. So, I would add that. But,
Sorry,
Well,
fellas.
it's all good, brother. I'm gonna go right on into our weekly segment with Frizz. This is the Saint Spotlight. With that, I'm gonna blow you up, Frizz. Take it away.
all right. So I want to talk about the ADA and some of the rules that the ADA have laid down. So you got three titles. I thought it was only two, but it's three titles. I can get my cat off my paperwork to make sure that I explain it correctly.
Well,
Title one, no discrimination to any person with a disability going into any public accommodations, which are hotels, public buildings, anything like that. You cannot be discriminated against because you have a service animal. Two is basically that the service animal can accompany anybody anywhere that they go. You can't stop them. The only way they can be stopped is if the animal doesn't behave, it's not housebroken, things like that. Then you can be asked to leave. But hotels, um, public events, all restaurants, whatever, can't stop you from coming in. And then they can say, but this is our rule. It doesn't work that way because you're a public uh, entity. You fall under the guidelines of the ADA to where you just can't. You got to let me in. You know, Title III is just an update to that for um, new architecture starting in 91. Everything has to be ADA compliant, whether it's hotels, conference buildings, offices, uh, rail transportation, anything that's public has to be ADA compliant. You don't have to have it in your house because that's your own personal area. But ADA compliance has to be met starting in 91, which means all the service animals that you have to go to with you wherever you go. So employers they can't discriminate against you under Title 1, Section 1 of it, but they don't have to give you accommodations for your animal. Most do, but they don't have to. Hotel rooms, um, just like if you were to break something or destroy something in the hotel room, you're responsible for it. If your dog or your mini horse does it, you're responsible. And that's really about all I have today for that. As we go, I'll get more in depth on stuff, but it's basically just to let people know that you can't be discriminated against. And the states can modify stuff, but they cannot go any lower than the minimum that the ADA requires. ADA says this. If a state goes anything below that, they're in trouble.
Outstanding. Well, thank you very much, Frizz, for that segment.
It was
And
informative.
informative. I hope there were so many highlights just from today's episode, and it was really a pleasure hearing Alma's story and a little bit of yours
Oh
as well.
yeah.
So I'm very grateful for you and Alma, and thank you so much for coming on and talking about this because, like you said, we're starting to see more and more service animals, and we're starting to hear more and more about it with social media, but there's still stigmas out there. There's still prejudices out there. And I think every story we tell like this, every time we tell it, even if one more person hears it, we just educated another person. And maybe those those horrible events won't happen to somebody, so they won't be triggered when they bring their animal in because people will know. And Frizz will tell you, since he's got Bean, you start to see that happen more often. You start to encounter that. People start to tell you their stories about it. And when you're like us and you care, you want to do something about it. So thank you for helping us educate.
Thank you, Doc.
Oh, my pleasure, fellas. Man, this is great. I
Yeah,
really
it's a
appreciate it.
pleasure to meet you. I've heard about you for a long time. It's a pleasure
Oh
to
boy.
meet you.
Probably
We,
all true.
yeah, it is. But we are working to get our website up. I did buy some domain space. It does take money and time to get that put together. I am not a web designer, but as soon as we have that up, I can't wait to get some pictures of Alma on there so that our viewers can see her, maybe even some short videos, and hopefully we
Heck
can have
yeah.
you back on the show sometime, Doc.
Heck yeah. Hey, real quick, can I plug something?
Yeah, absolutely. Please
Yeah.
do.
So Alma is getting older, so I applied for another service dog. It's a 2-year wait, but I was accepted through a program called Canines for Warriors, and they're home based out of Florida. And if you get the chance, go check them out. They're an amazing organization. They pay for everything for the vet, with the exception of your own travel. Big deal. You go there, it's a 3-week course. Basically, you meet the dog, you work with the dog, you train with them. They provide everything: meals, lodging. They provide food for the dogs. They give you, like a little goodie bag. They give you your own harness, leash, the whole works. So free to the veteran. So check
That's
them out,
amazing.
please.
Do you have that website, Doc?
I will get it to you. I don't have it
What
off
are
the
they,
top of my head.
what are they called again?
Canines for Warriors.
Canines for Warriors. I think I followed them already.
Great organization.
Outstanding. Well, listeners, remember to subscribe so that you'll be notified. We do go live with a new guest and a new service animal every other week. So if you do know of anyone that has a service animal that has an amazing story that would like to help educate or get this information out, please let us know in the comments and we'll reach out because every story matters. We all have one, and especially when it comes to these animals, anyone who's met Alma, anyone who's met Bean, or anyone who's met Striker, they know they can see what these animals do, and it's so much more than it sounds like it really is. So, thank you so much for listening. Please like, subscribe, and share it out so we can get this information out. Thank you for being a part of the Saint Show today. Lead with love, lead with change. Chief out.